Welcome to Discover You Radio's Discussions. The full spectrum. The full spectrum. Discover You Radio's Discussions. The full spectrum is proudly sponsored by Counterpoint Publishing and is directed and produced under the guidance of Will Stenner.
Their Uncle Rick diagnosed the car in his backyard under a tree. Here they come, rolling in the drive. You can hear a bunch of loose tools and parts rolling around in their trunk. Now they want you to put the parts on. Your Guide to Customer Service by Bread and Eagle. You can find it at Amazon and Kindle.
The Brief.
It's 10 after 6, you're clocked out, the registers are shut down, and there's that customer peeking through the window like a lost raccoon. Get Your Guide to Customer Service by Brandon Eagle. He addresses this. You can find it on Amazon and Kindle.
This is the brief on the Rewording Ritual. Welcome to episode number 46 of Discover You Radio's Discussions, The Brief, where we cover Chapter 3, titled The Rewording Ritual, from Brandon Eagle's book called Your Guide to Customer Service, the Mirror Edition. This chapter exposes the dangerous liability trap of customers who refuse standard procedures, showing exactly why holding your ground is your ultimate professional protection. First, we really need to understand the rewarder mindset. These are the folks who think persistence guarantees a shortcut, asking you to quote-unquote just take a quick listen to magically shrink the risk. So are they actually clarifying or just cross-examining you to wear you down? Second, recognize the massive liability of informal drive-by diagnosis. Look, stepping outside for a free guess is a total booby trap. If you say a noise is nothing and it's actually a major safety issue, you take all the blame. Following standard procedures, like requiring a formal repair order, directly protects you, the tech, and the shop from future legal complaints. Finally, here is how you end the loop. Step 1. Calmly state that a repair order is required so a technician can properly diagnose the vehicle. Step 2. If they keep rewarding it, get blunt. Outright tell them rewarding doesn't change the policy, the answer is no, and you won't accept liability. You can purchase Your Guide to Customer Service by Brandon Eagle on Amazon in paperback form or download it on Kindle. Remember, repetition doesn't rewrite reality, and enforcing proper processes protects your career from the costly consequences of free guesses. Stay tuned as Robert Simmons and Rita Fox go into a deep dive regarding this chapter.
There's a method to the madness of the customer who rewords everything 4 or 5 different times. Give them the same answer over and over again. Your Guide to Customer Service by Brandon Eagle on Amazon and Kindle. Stay tuned as Robert Simmons and Rita Fox go into a deep dive. You ever get that customer that compliments you, praises you, says that you're their favorite advisor? And when you can't give that family discount, they give you a bad review? Your Guide to Customer Service by Brandon Eagle on Amazon and Kindle.
Welcome to episode number 46 of Discover You Radio's Discussions, the Deep Dive segment. Okay, we covered Chapter 2, titled The Last Minute Pickup in episode 45. And if you thought the customer characteristic was annoying, this one is 10 times as worse because these types of customers are literally insane. They are the definition of repeating the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Let's have fun with this chapter, and hopefully this type of customer is listening because they need to hear this.
Yeah, I really hope they are because this behavior is just everywhere.
Right. It's so common. I mean, imagine walking into a super busy hospital. You just march right up to the receptionist at the front desk, roll up your sleeve, and show them this like glowing purple, highly alarming rash on your arm.
Man.
And you demand that they, just take a quick look at it so you don't have to pay a copay to see an actual doctor.
Which is wild.
Yeah.
If you did that, you would be politely, or well, maybe not so politely, just laughed right out of the building.
Exactly. But at service desks all over the world, whether it's automotive, IT support, home repair, customers try this exact same maneuver literally every single day.
They really do.
Mm-hmm.
And, we're talking directly to you today, specifically to anyone listening who might recognize themselves as what we are calling a reworder.
The reworder. I love that term because it is this incredibly common, just deeply fascinating and wildly frustrating behavioral loop.
It really is. And our entire mission for this deep dive today is to dissect the psychology of a customer who truly genuinely believes that rephrasing a request will somehow magically override company policy.
Like it's a cheat code or something.
Right, exactly. We're going to examine the massive and usually completely invisible liability risks of doing these undocumented quick favors.
Because there's a lot of risk there.
Oh, a ton. And we'll also explore the core rules for service desk etiquette. Not to, scold anyone, but to establish a mutual understanding. The ultimate goal here is to help you, the customer, understand that standard processes exist to protect everyone involved.
Yeah, they are never there to punish you. I think that's a huge misconception. We really need to get inside the head of the customer who is performing this rewording ritual, right?
We do. Because to understand why this behavior drives service professionals completely up the wall, we really have to unpack the logic that makes the customer think this is like a totally reasonable thing to do.
Okay, so what is the actual scenario we are looking at here? Paint the picture for us.
Well, let's set the baseline. The core request usually sounds something exactly like this. They'll say, hey, can you just come outside and listen to this noise real quick?
Real quick.
Right, just real quick. And on the surface, that sounds totally benign. But underneath, the customer is aggressively trying to bypass the system.
Because they don't want to deal with the process.
Exactly. They do not want to go through a documented process.
Right.
They absolutely do not want to authorize a formal repair order. They don't want to wait for a certified technician to become available. And they certainly do not want to pay a diagnostic fee.
They just want a shortcut.
They want a shortcut. So they use variations of the exact same question, operating under this delusion that repetition will somehow override the constraints of time, the laws of physics, and, strict operational boundaries.
Okay, I hear you on the boundaries, but let's be real for a second. Let me play devil's advocate here.
Okay, go for it.
It literally takes 30 seconds to walk out to the parking lot and listen to a squeaking belt or a rattling dashboard. Isn't the service advisor just hiding behind policy because they're busy or, I don't know, maybe even a little lazy? I mean, what is the actual harm in just listening?
See, that is the exact trap. And it is exactly what the customer assumes. They assume the refusal is purely about effort.
Oh, like the advisor just doesn't want to get up from their chair.
Right. But the reality is entirely about liability. But before we even get to the legal nightmare of the quick listen, we have to understand the mental gymnastics the customer is doing.
Right, the psychology of it.
Exactly. There is a 4-step script, a logic loop, running inside the reworder's head. And in their own mind, they are the hero of this story. They think they're being incredibly logical.
Okay, let's break down that internal logic loop because I find the psychology of negotiation super fascinating. How does this loop actually begin?
So, step 1 is internal justification. The customer tells themselves, I'm not arguing, I'm just asking.
Oh, that's so sneaky.
It is. They frame their persistence as mere curiosity. By telling themselves they are just seeking clarification, they strip away any aggressive intent in their own mind.
Wow, so they view themselves as the polite victim of needless bureaucracy.
Exactly. They think they're just having a casual conversation. And then we hit step 2, which is, if I keep asking, they will eventually see how simple this is.
This is where the delusion really sets in.
Totally. They assume the advisor's refusal is based on a misunderstanding of the request, not on a hard policy.
The advisor must think I want a full 3-hour diagnostic teardown. Let me clarify that I just want a tiny, simple favor.
Precisely. Which leads directly into step 3, and this is where it gets slightly manipulative.
Ooh, okay. What's step 3?
Step 3 is, if they admit it's simple, they'll feel silly saying no.
Oh, wow. So they're actively trying to induce, cognitive dissonance in the service advisor?
Yes, exactly. Cognitive dissonance is that really uncomfortable psychological tension you feel when your actions do not match your beliefs.
Right.
The customer wants to corner the advisor logically, forcing them to concede that the request, like just walking 10 feet outside, is physically so small that enforcing a corporate policy against it would be utterly absurd.
So they are trying to make the advisor feel like the bad guy for being rigid over something so completely trivial.
Exactly. And that brings us to step 4, the ultimate goal of the loop, which is if they feel silly, they will finally say yes.
It's a war of attrition.
It really is. It's an entire negotiation strategy based on wearing down the other person's resolve by aggressively minimizing the perceived effort. It's the illusion of shrinking the request.
Shrinking the request. That's a vital concept here. Because customers deliberately use minimizing language, don't they?
Oh, all the time. Listen for it the next time you're in any customer service environment. They say things like, just a second, or just an opinion, or just a quick look.
They operate under this fallacy that if the request sounds small enough conversationally, the actual real-world liability magically vanishes.
Yes. And it doesn't.
I want to elevate this past the service desk for a second because we see this in other high-stakes professions, too.
Oh, absolutely.
It's exactly like cornering a lawyer at a cocktail party and saying, hey, I know we aren't at the firm, but could you just take a quick glance at this 10-page real estate contract? Just give me your layman's opinion.
Yep, just a quick look.
Right. I'm not asking for official legal counsel, just a quick look.
That is a perfect analogy. And, how would a competent lawyer respond to that?
They would shut it down immediately.
Categorically refuse. Because there is no such thing as a layman's opinion from a professional in their field of expertise.
Right. The moment that lawyer gives you an opinion on that contract, an attorney-client relationship is implied.
Exactly. And they are legally liable for the advice they just gave you for free.
Wow.
The customer at the service desk is doing the exact same thing, but they fail to recognize the professional expertise and the immense liability of the service advisor.
So we know the customer views every no as a negotiable opening offer. They think the wall is there to block them, and if they tap on it enough times with different vocabulary words, it'll just crack.
But the reality is that wall is a load-bearing structure holding up the entire business. It's there to protect everyone.
So let's look at how this standoff actually plays out in real time, because standing at the desk and experiencing this loop is incredibly awkward.
Oh, it's so uncomfortable. It's the definition of an immovable object meeting a highly persistent force.
Right.
If you stand at a service desk long enough, you will hear this exact conversational judo. You'll hear a customer walk up, completely bypass the check-in process, and just start the negotiation.
Let's act this out. I'll be the customer. I walk up, jingle my keys, and say something like, hey there, look, I don't need to check it in. Can you just come over to the parking lot and listen to this noise real quick? Just tell me what it is.
And the professional advisor is trained to hold the boundary. So I would say for our own protection, if we're going to help you find a noise, we have to write a repair order so your technician can listen to the noise with you. That is the experienced professional who needs to find out what that noise is.
But me, as the reworder, I completely ignore the substance of that answer. I immediately pivot. I say, right. I know you guys are busy, but I just have this noise I'd really like you to listen to with me. I'm not asking you to fix it. It'll just take a second.
And the advisor must remain completely static here.
Yeah.
I'd say for our own protection, if we are going to help you find a noise, we have to write a repair order so your technician can listen to the noise with you. That is the experienced professional who needs to find out what that noise is.
So then I shrink the request even further. I go, yeah, but if you just listen, you might have an idea, just an off-the-record opinion.
And again, I'd say for our own protection, if we're going to help you find a noise, we have to write a repair order so your technician can listen to the noise with you.
Gosh, it feels incredibly robotic. Like, as the customer in that scenario, I would feel like I'm talking to a brick wall. I would feel so ignored.
I know, it feels harsh.
Why does the advisor have to be so intensely, almost unnervingly repetitive? Why can't they at least change up their phrasing to sound a little more human?
Because the moment the advisor changes their phrasing, they lose. The advisor must stay frozen in their outcome while the customer's words change.
Oh, okay.
We call this maintaining loop status. The customer is desperately hunting for a new variable to argue against.
I see.
Yeah, if the advisor changes their vocabulary to sound more empathetic or conversational, the reworder will immediately latch on to the new word as a crack in the armor.
Okay, I totally see what you mean. So if the advisor tries to be helpful and says, I can't go outside, it's against policy, the customer instantly counters with, well, then I'll just drive the car inside the service bay.
Exactly.
Or if the advisor says, I'm not a certified technician, the customer says, that's fine, I just want a non-certified guess.
You've got it. You have to give them absolutely zero new information to work with.
You are basically starving the negotiation of oxygen.
That's a great way to put it. A negotiation requires two parties shifting their positions. If one party absolutely refuses to shift, the negotiation dies.
That makes so much sense.
But eventually, the advisor has to deliver a blunt reality check to break the loop entirely. They have to firmly state, you have asked the same question and reworded it several times. It does not change company policy. And the answer is no.
Oh, that's firm.
It has to be. The advisor has to assert that their specific job is to write the repair, order the RO, and document the concern. Their job is emphatically not to play guess that noise out in the driveway.
Which brings us back to the most critical part of this entire deep dive, the liability booby trap.
Yes, the biggest piece of the puzzle.
Because we touched on it earlier, but we really need to dig into what a repair order actually is, legally speaking. Like, why is the advisor being so strictly repetitive?
Because stepping outside for a quick listen is not a simple favor. It is a massive legal and financial trap.
It really is.
It's arguably the most dangerous thing an advisor can do. When we break down the true cost of a quick listen, it is terrifying. A reworder is actually asking for a free, entirely undocumented diagnosis.
Right.
And furthermore, they're asking for this diagnosis from the wrong person. The advisor, who is fundamentally an administrator and a coordinator, is not the technician.
Yeah, they aren't the ones turning the wrenches.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're expecting the business to take full legal accountability if that wrong person happens to be wrong.
Let's define the repair order, because I think a lot of customers view the RO as just a piece of paper, like an annoying bureaucratic hurdle, or a way for the company to justify charging a diagnostic fee. Oh, it's so much more than that.
Legally, what does that document do?
A repair order is essentially a legal contract. It establishes a formal chain of custody for the vehicle.
Okay.
It documents the exact complaint in the customer's own words. It provides written authorization for the business to operate the vehicle. And, most importantly, it assigns a legally certified technician to perform a documented inspection.
And without an RO?
Without an RO, none of that exists. The business has zero documentation that they ever interacted with the customer's property.
So let's play out the nightmare scenario here. What are the actual legal risks if the advisor caves?
Oh, it's bad.
Let's say the customer wears them down, the advisor steps outside into the parking lot, listens to a rattling noise under the hood and says, hey, it's probably just a loose heat shield.
Yeah.
It's annoying, but it's nothing to worry about. It's safe to drive.
Right. But in reality, because the advisor couldn't put the car on a lift and inspect it properly, they missed the fact that the noise was actually a failing wheel bearing.
Or a catastrophic brake caliper issue. Or a major internal engine component about to detonate.
So the customer takes that quote-unquote expert advice, drives away, merges onto the highway at 70 miles an hour, and the wheel completely shears off the axle, causing a massive accident.
Exactly. And when the tow truck brings that wrecked vehicle back, or worse, when the personal injury lawyers get involved, who gets blamed?
I'm guessing not the customer.
Nope. The blame does not fall on the customer for pushing for a free guess. It certainly does not fall on the certified technician who never even laid eyes on the car.
It falls on the advisor.
The blame, the financial liability, and potentially the legal negligence falls squarely on the advisor. You, the advisor who just listened real quick and gave an off-the-cuff opinion, are now responsible for the outcome.
Because that casual guess magically transforms into what the dealership told me.
Oh, 100%. The customer will absolutely weaponize that casual conversation. They will stand in a courtroom and say, the representative of the company told me it was safe to drive.
That is a terrifying thought.
They absolutely will do it. And even in less dramatic scenarios, it completely undermines the actual highly trained technician before the car ever makes it into the service bay.
How so?
Well, if the advisor guesses it's a cheap $50 fix, they have anchored the customer's expectations. So when the technician properly diagnoses it as a $1,000 repair, the customer loses their mind.
Ah, right. It leads directly to the dreaded, you said, phone calls.
Exactly. Well, your advisor out front said it was just a loose belt. Why are you trying to scam me for $1,000?
So enforcing this policy being that immovable object at the desk is not about the advisor being stubborn.
Not at all.
It's not about them having a bad attitude or lacking customer service skills. It is quite literally professional survival.
Precisely. A shortcut in service does not save time. It almost always comes back as comebacks, complaints, and massive liability claims. An advisor cannot trade their career, their safety, and the business's liability for a customer's temporary convenience.
Okay, so the stakes are wildly high. The legal and financial realities are terrifying. So why can't the customer just accept the no?
That's the big question.
If the advisor says, I can't do it, it's a liability, why do they keep pushing? This brings us to a really fascinating psychological insight. It's the realization that the customer does not actually have a question problem. They have an answer problem.
This is such a profound shift in perspective. The customer heard the advisor perfectly well the first time. They understand the English language.
Right.
They comprehend the words being spoken. They just fundamentally dislike the reality of the answer they received.
So instead of practicing acceptance, They deploy what we can identify as the 3 S's of rewording.
Right, to try and artificially engineer a reality they prefer.
Let's dissect those 3 S's because this is the very anatomy of conversational manipulation. The first S is shrink the request, like we discussed earlier. Just a quick listen.
Make it sound like it requires 0 physical effort or time.
Exactly. What's the second S?
The second S is soften the risk. The customer will say something like, look, I'm not asking you to fix it right now. I just want a general idea of what's going on.
Oh, I've heard that one.
Right. They are trying to separate the act of diagnosing from the act of repairing, pretending that a verbal diagnosis carries no weight, no expectation, and 0 consequences.
And the third S is shift the responsibility. Just tell me what it might be.
Such a sneaky tactic.
Oh, it is. By asking what it might be, they are giving the advisor a false sense of security, implying they won't hold them to it. It sounds so innocent.
But it's a trap.
Right. But we all know the second the advisor says, well, it might be the alternator, the customer's brain immediately locks in on, it's the alternator.
Yes. They're doing everything in their psychological toolkit to get the advisor to step just 1 inch outside the safety of the documented process.
But a small exception still carries full-size consequences. A quick listen can still result in a massive lawsuit or a dangerous accident.
Which is exactly why the advisor's ironclad consistency isn't just about being annoying or bureaucratic. We need to look at this consistency as a 4-way shield.
A 4-way shield, I like that.
Yeah, if the advisor holds the line, endures the awkwardness, and refuses to play the negotiation game, they are actually actively protecting 4 distinct entities at once. Let's explore this 4-way shield.
Sure. So first and foremost, the consistency protects the business from undocumented liability. We covered this with the legal reality of the repair order.
Right.
If there is no RO, there is no paper trail. If something goes wrong, the business has no defense against a negligence claim.
Exactly. And second, it protects the technician. It shields them from receiving secondhand, half-right, or completely wrong information.
Think about the workflow there. If the advisor guesses the noise is coming from the suspension, the technician might waste an hour tearing down the suspension when the real issue is a loose motor mount.
It poisons the diagnostic process before it even begins.
Exactly. So what's the third shield?
Third, and this is incredibly counterintuitive to the frustrated customer, but it is vital. It protects the customer themselves.
Really? How so?
It protects them from bad guesses and false reassurance. If a customer is told it's fine to drive when it isn't, their physical safety is literally at risk. The strict policy ensures their vehicle is evaluated solely by someone fundamentally qualified to make that life and death call.
The concept of policy is protection, not punishment. The customer feels punished because they aren't getting what they want in the moment, but they're actually being protected from a potentially lethal mistake.
Precisely. And finally, the fourth shield. It protects the advisor.
Mm-hmm.
It keeps them from being the one everyone points the finger at when things inevitably go wrong. It protects their livelihood.
The reworder genuinely believes that if they just keep talking, if they just find the right combination of syllables, the truth will magically change.
But it won't. If the answer is the exact same every single time you ask, the problem is not a lack of clarity from the staff. The problem is your lack of acceptance.
Man, that hits incredibly hard. The problem is acceptance, but let's dig even deeper here because we have to address a very uncomfortable territory. There is an unspoken truth beneath all of this posturing and rewording.
There really is.
Why is the customer fighting so incredibly hard to avoid checking their car in? Why aggressively push for a free, undocumented guess instead of just utilizing the service department the way it was designed to be used?
We have to address the harsh, undeniable reality that drives the vast majority of this specific behavior. Persistent, aggressive rewording very often signals a much more fundamental issue.
And what's that?
It signals that the customer simply lacks the money for a proper repair.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is the massive elephant in the room. And we need to approach this with some deep empathy because financial panic is a very real, very scary thing.
It absolutely is.
People do not want to admit they cannot afford something. There is a lot of shame tied up in financial insecurity. So instead of standing at a crowded desk and admitting, I'm broke, my car is making a terrifying noise, and I don't know what to do, their fight or flight response kicks in.
Exactly. It is a defense mechanism.
Yeah.
The fear of a massive unpayable bill morphs into indignation and aggression.
Right.
They try to backdoor a free diagnosis so they can either go try to fix it themselves with cheap parts or take it to an uncertified, cheaper mechanic down the street and say, the dealership said it's the water pump, just replace that.
They are desperately trying to control a situation where they feel totally powerless. But as much as we can empathize with the panic of being broke, the professional world cannot bend the laws of physics to accommodate an empty bank account.
It cannot. Empathy is crucial, but it does not alter liability. If the noise really matters, if it is a genuine concern, the only professional path forward is to check the vehicle in and authorize the diagnostic fee. That is how the professional world operates.
And if the customer simply isn't willing to do that,
then one of two things is factually true. Either the issue isn't actually that important, despite how much of a theatrical fuss the customer is making at the counter, or they simply do not have the money.
right.
And if it is the latter, the harsh reality is this. You must park your car in your garage until you can come up with the funds to repair it properly.
Wow, that is blunt. Target in your garage. But, it makes perfect logical sense. Think about it from the advisor's perspective.
Yeah.
If you stand there asking the same question over and over, trying to grind down the advisor's sanity, it becomes painfully obvious who is trying to wear whom down. It leads the advisor to one logical, unavoidable conclusion. That this person cannot afford to be here.
Exactly.
And honestly, an undocumented wild guess from a service advisor standing in a noisy driveway doesn't magically fix a broken, unsafe car anyway. Knowing what is broken for free does not fix the vehicle if you cannot afford the parts or the labor.
Precisely. The vehicle remains just as broken and potentially dangerous as it was before the conversation even started. A free guess does not repair a blown gasket.
That's the truth.
The customer's financial situation, no matter how dire, does not alter the dealership's legal liability, nor does it suspend the laws of physics governing a failing automotive component.
So we have thoroughly broken down the psychology of the logic loop, the terrifying legal liability, and the hidden financial struggles driving the whole interaction. Now, how do service departments actually survive this onslaught?
Good question.
How do they establish these boundaries without descending into total chaos every single day? There are core rules, a 10-point etiquette guide for the service desk to establish and maintain ironclad boundaries. Let's unpack the most critical rules from this philosophy.
Let's examine Rules 1 and 2, which are tightly linked and form the foundation of boundary setting. Rule 1 states, one question, one real answer. When the advisor clearly explains the proper process, that answer is final.
Simple enough.
And Rule 2 reinforces this behavioral expectation. Stop shopping for a different answer. Asking the exact same thing 5 different ways is not seeking clarity. It is hunting for a weakness to exploit.
I love the analogy of a secret menu. Rephrasing the question doesn't unlock a hidden outcome. It's not like going to an In-N-Out burger, where if you whisper animal style, you get a completely different meal.
Right.
You are just repeating the same reality. If the answer doesn't change, it's because the operational policy doesn't change.
Then we move to Rules 3 and 4, which focus strictly on professional boundaries and job descriptions. Rule 3. Advisors are not drive-by diagnosticians.
So true.
Expecting a free diagnosis in the driveway without a legal repair order is walking right into that massive liability trap we spend so much time discussing. And Rule 4. Respect the division of roles.
Right. The advisor documents the concern and coordinates the process. The certified technician actually diagnoses and repairs the complex machinery. To expect the administrative advisor to just listen and accurately guess is asking the wrong person to do the wrong job for the wrong price, which is $0.
You are actively disrespecting both professions simultaneously.
Exactly.
Moving on. Rules 5 and 6 deal with the long-term consequences and the true purpose of the policy. Rule 5 warns that free guesses can get very expensive. A quick listen that yields bad information damages trust, creates comebacks, and ruins reputations. It is free in the moment, but incredibly costly later for everyone involved.
And Rule 6 is the mantra we need to print on banners and hang in every service department. Policy is protection, not punishment. When they tell you that you have to check your car in like every other paying customer, they aren't blocking you.
Right.
They are protecting your safety, the technician's time, and the shop's liability. Fairness means there are no secret shortcuts just because you have the loudest, most persistent voice in the lobby.
Which brings us to Rules 7 and 8, which are fundamentally about emotional regulation for the customer. Rule 7, take no as a boundary, not a personal attack.
People struggle with that one.
They really do. A healthy, functioning service department operates on clear, objective boundaries, not on a contest of who can argue the longest. Enforcing a boundary is professional responsibility. It is not personal rudeness. And Rule 8 basically states, if you truly, genuinely want answers about your vehicle, you have to trust the documented process. Authorize the diagnosis. Let the professionals do their job.
Now, I want to jump to Rule 9 because this one shifts the spotlight entirely away from the advisor and the customer and points it directly at management.
Oh, this is a big one.
Because none of these boundaries matter if leadership doesn't hold the line. The rule is, management, back the policy, not the persistence. When a reworder inevitably realizes the advisor won't cave, they demand a manager and complain, your guy wouldn't even walk outside to listen to my car. The leadership must support the advisor who followed the procedure.
This is perhaps the most critical operational rule on the entire list. If management fails here, the entire system collapses into chaos. Leadership cannot, under any circumstances, reward the customer who tried to bypass the safety rules.
But let me challenge that for a second. What if a manager walks out of their office, sees a packed lobby, and sees an angry, screaming customer causing a massive scene? Isn't it a manager's job to de-escalate? Isn't it sometimes just easier for the manager to say, okay, sir, I apologize, I'll come listen to it right now. Just calm down.
It might be easier in that exact 3-minute window, but it is catastrophic in the long term for the culture of the business. If management actively undermines their own frontline staff simply to appease a loud, persistent reworder, they are actively training their customers to ignore the rules and break the system.
Oh, wow.
You are teaching the customer that if they throw a big enough tantrum or repeat themselves enough times, the safety policies simply do not apply to them.
You are conditioning them. You are rewarding the exact behavior you are trying to eliminate. It's exactly like giving a screaming child a candy bar just to make them quiet down in the grocery store. You have just guaranteed they will scream twice as hard the next time they want sugar.
Precisely. Furthermore, you completely destroy the morale, the authority, and the trust of your service advisors.
Yeah, why would they ever try to enforce a rule again?
Exactly. Why should an advisor ever endure the stress of fighting to uphold a corporate boundary if they know their own manager is just going to walk out and throw them under the bus the second a customer raises their voice? It creates a toxic, spineless culture. You have to hold the line.
You absolutely do. And it all culminates in the final rule, Rule 10. Repetition doesn't rewrite reality. Asking over and over again does not make the request more legally sound or physically possible. It just exposes a power struggle. If the answer is consistent, respect the reality of the situation.
This has been such an intense, multi-layered look at a conversation that happens every single day, largely unnoticed by those who don't work in the industry. We've journeyed from the annoying repetition at the front counter, deep into the psychology of conversational negotiation, all the way down to the terrifying legal liabilities, the hidden financial panic, and the vital role of management.
It really forces you to rethink what it means to enforce and respect a professional rule.
It absolutely does. And it leaves us with a much broader, much more profound concept to ponder, well beyond the service drive or the IT help desk. Think about this in the context of your own life.
That's a great point. Where else in your life are you treating a clear boundary as a negotiation?
Whether it is in your personal relationships, your workplace, or with your own personal goals.
When the words keep changing but the answer does not, wisdom lies not in asking again, but in hearing at last.
So true.
Stay tuned for the debate with Dakota Freeman and Lauren Miller. I love listening to them argue. You know those two are close friends, but man, they sure can lash out logic at each other.
You look up, and there they are again. That customer that said that they weren't coming back last time. But there was a time before that, and a time before that. I'm never coming back. I'm never coming back. Your Guide to Customer Service by Brandon Eagle on Amazon and Kindle.
Stay tuned for Dakota Freeman and Lauren Miller as they get into an intense debate regarding the subject matter as they give two separate opinions.
They walk in the door, they see a line, and they pass it up and go right to your desk and scream, "I'm an employee!" They're not that special. Get Your Guide to Customer Service by Brandon Eagle. You can find it on Amazon and Kindle.
Welcome to episode number 46 of Discover You Radio's discussion segment called The Debate, where we are going to share our disagreements on chapter number 3 of Brandon Eagle's book called Your Guide to Customer Service, the Mirror Edition, which can be found on Amazon in paperback, or you can download it to your Kindle. I really love following up after Robert and Rita. It's always good to be at the end of these segments. Okay, let's get started. So imagine risking your entire career and honestly thousands of dollars of your company's money just because you tried to be nice for 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's a terrifying thought.
Right? I mean, anyone listening to this who has actually worked a service desk knows the exact pit in their stomach when a customer, casually points out to the parking lot and says, "Hey, can you just come outside and listen to this noise real quick?"
Because it is never, ever real quick.
Never. And that's exactly what we're digging into today. We are examining the rewording ritual. Brandon Eagle's text really zeroes in on these customers who repeatedly rephrase their requests, basically trying to get a free, informal diagnosis to bypass the proper documented repair order procedures.
Mm-hmm.
So the central question for our debate today is about liability and professional boundaries. Basically, do service advisors bear an unfair professional risk during these encounters? And should managers rigidly prioritize policy over appeasing these persistent customers?
Right. And I know exactly where you stand on this.
Oh, absolutely. My position is that advisors face an asymmetrical, fundamentally unfair liability booby trap. The pressure placed on them is just immense, and management must absolutely prioritize policy over appeasement, because any deviation, even a small one, invites catastrophic liability.
And, well, I take the opposing view on this. While I certainly acknowledge that the risk is real, I argue that it represents a standard professional boundary, not some, unfair trap. Furthermore, rigidly treating every persistent customer as a malicious manipulator, which, let's be honest, the text sometimes leans toward.
It has a strong perspective, yes.
It does, but that ignores the nuanced psychological reality of service interactions. Customers who reword their requests are overwhelmingly driven by profound financial anxiety or just a lack of understanding about automotive repair. It's not a calculated desire to sabotage the advisor's career.
Well,
protecting the business is essential. I agree with that. But doing so with a fortress mentality, that alienates the very people you are in business to serve.
okay, I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on why that fortress mentality is, frankly, entirely necessary. You really have to look at the daily reality of the service drive.
Okay.
In many ways, the drive functions like a courtroom, and the advisor is constantly on trial. If you step back and look at the mechanism of what is actually happening when a customer asks for a quick listen, it's an ambush.
An ambush? That's a strong word.
It is, because the customer is asking the advisor to step outside, give an off-the-cuff verbal diagnosis, and basically take all the risk with absolutely none of the documentation. Let me offer an analogy to clarify how absurd this is.
Go ahead.
It's like walking into a high-end restaurant, grabbing the host at the podium.
The person doing the seating.
Right? The person not cooking. And you demand they guess the secret ingredient in the chef's signature sauce. And then you sue the restaurant when the host guesses wrong and you have an allergic reaction.
Okay, wow.
You're bypassing the process, asking the wrong person, and shifting all the liability onto the business. If the advisor steps outside, listens to a rattling sound, and casually says, "Oh, it's probably just a loose heat shield," and it later turns out to be a failing wheel bearing that causes an accident,
The advisor is on the hook.
fully liable. The verbal gas magically transforms into a legally binding statement of what the dealership said. That is why it's an inherently unfair position to put them in.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. Your restaurant analogy actually highlights my point perfectly.
How so?
Because the liability only exists if the host voluntarily decides to play chef. If the host simply says, "I'm sorry, I don't make the food, you'll have to order the dish," there is no liability.
But the same applies to the service drive. The risk isn't an unfair ambush if the advisor simply refuses to play Guess That Noise. Eagle's text beautifully outlines the psychology behind this with what he calls the customer logic loop.
Right, the shrinking request.
Exactly. The customer is employing this intuitive, kind of primitive negotiation tactic. They deeply believe that if they shrink the request, asking for just a second or just an opinion, they magically shrink the financial cost of the diagnosis.
Yes, they want it for free, but that loop is born of sheer panic about a potentially ruined engine, not malice. An advisor who just adheres to their role, refusing to give an undocumented diagnosis, is just practicing standard professional boundary setting. They aren't navigating an unfair legal minefield unless they voluntarily step on a mine. The boundary is clear. Enforcing it is the job.
Enforcing it is the job, sure, but just holding the boundary is not nearly as simple as you make it sound.
Why not? They just have to say no.
Because the text details exactly how this rewording ritual plays out, and it is explicitly designed to wear the advisor down. Let's do a quick role play to show how this actually unfolds in the drive.
Oh, all right, let's do it.
Okay, I'll be the stressed advisor giving the legally mandated, highly structured response Eagle outlines. You be the customer.
Sounds good. I'm walking up to the desk. Hey, I've got this weird rattling sound. Can you just come out and tell me what it is real quick?
I understand, sir. But for our own protection, if we're going to help you find a noise, we have to write a repair order so your technician can listen to the noise with you.
I know you need to do all that, but I have this noise I'd really just like you to listen to. Can you just step out for a second? It's just a simple noise.
Again, we have to write a repair order so the technician can listen.
Yeah, but if you just listen, you might know what it is. And scene.
And scene. Exactly. To you, the customer, it feels like you're just seeking clarity. But to the advisor, that is a slow-motion cross-examination. And if the advisor cracks, if they give in just to end the relentless repetition, the operational failure is massive.
Because they aren't the technician.
Right. Let's look at the actual mechanism of that failure. The advisor goes out, listens, comes back, and writes a repair order based on their own, frankly, amateur guess. Now the technician, the highly paid trained diagnostician, gets a ticket with half-baked secondhand information.
True, that's not ideal.
The tech goes hunting for a loose heat shield because the advisor was anchored to that guess and wastes an hour of expensive bay time missing the actual failing component. The entire shop's efficiency derails just because the advisor was worn down by a coercive tactic.
Look, protecting the tech is fine in theory, but look at the cost of that rigid protection. When you enforce these boundaries like an unyielding brick wall, you turn a simple customer interaction into a hostile standoff.
It doesn't have to be hostile.
But it often becomes that way. Yes, Eagle establishes clear rules about the division of labor. The advisor documents the technician diagnosis. And I completely agree that this division protects the integrity of the diagnostic process. A technician absolutely needs to experience the symptom directly.
Glad we agree on that.
But my contention is with the assumption that the customer is deliberately executing a coercive tactic. Eagle's rules assert that repetition doesn't rewrite reality, and that asking the same question 5 different ways is just hunting for someone to break policy.
Which is true.
True, but the customer doesn't realize the wall isn't there to block them. It's there to protect the repair process. If we treat their persistence as a malicious interrogation, the advisor approaches the interaction defensively. That psychological wear and tear you mentioned earlier, it is massively amplified by the advisor believing they're under attack, rather than just dealing with a stressed human being who doesn't understand shop logistics.
Okay, but an advisor cannot hold that boundary, regardless of whether they view the customer as malicious or just anxious, if their manager undercuts them the second a customer complains.
Ah, the management piece.
Right, this brings us to the operational core of Eagle's framework, specifically the rule that management must back the policy, not the persistence. Let's say the advisor stands firm. The customer gets frustrated and demands to speak to the service manager. The customer says, "Your advisor wouldn't even walk outside for 10 seconds to listen to my car."
Which happens every day.
Every single day. And if the manager caves, if they step in and say, okay, let's just go take a quick look to calm them down, they have completely destroyed the system.
That's a compelling argument, But have you considered how incredibly blunt, almost hostile, the author's prescribed management solutions are?
Hostile? I'd call it firm.
Well, let's look at the text. Eagle explicitly addresses the underlying issue of financial anxiety, but his solution lacks any nuance. He writes that if the customer keeps pushing because they don't have the diagnostic fee, they should, and I quote, park your car in your garage until you can come up with it.
Yeah, it's tough love.
It's alienating, such a rigid, unyielding enforcement of policy, prioritizing a hardline stance over any form of empathetic de-escalation. It paints all persistence as an existential threat to the business. A manager stepping in to de-escalate isn't necessarily destroying the system. Sometimes it is just recognizing that a strictly transactional application of policy is terrible customer service.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning, mostly because you are conflating empathy with liability assumption. Eagle's tone is blunt because the consequences are severe. Empathy for a customer's wallet does not alter the laws of physics, mechanics, or jurisprudence.
But it alters the customer relationship.
Sure, but if a customer cannot afford a diagnostic fee, having a manager guess at a noise for free does not solve their financial problem. It merely transfers the financial liability to the dealership when the guess is invariably wrong. A small exception for a simple noise still carries full-size consequences.
I'm not saying the manager should give a free diagnosis, though.
But that's what stepping out to listen is. If management gives a secret shortcut just to quiet a complaining customer, they train that customer and honestly every other customer watching in the waiting room that policies are fake.
Well,
They establish a precedent that professional diagnosis is just a free guessing game for whoever argues the longest. That is exactly why Eagle's rule about free guesses getting expensive is so vital. Free now means costly later in the form of comebacks, bad parts ordered, and broken trust. Consistency is not stubbornness, it is protection.
again, I am not suggesting the manager should give a free diagnosis, but a manager can de-escalate without acting like a bouncer at a nightclub.
A bouncer?
Yeah. If management rigidly views every request for a quick listen as a liability booby trap, the service department becomes an adversarial environment. The text advises that we should view no as a boundary, not a personal attack. I completely agree with that principle.
Exactly.
No, we can't just listen without a repair order. Is an active professional responsibility. But the shop has to communicate that responsibility without the underlying subtext that the customer is trying to pull a fast one. Healthy service departments run on clear boundaries, yes, but they also run on trust. When you tell a struggling customer to just park it in your garage, you aren't protecting the business. You are ensuring that customer never returns when they actually do have the money.
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame it differently. The trust you are talking about can only be built on a foundation of reality.
Okay.
And the reality is, as Eagle puts it in his final rule, repetition does not rewrite reality. The customer's entire strategy, conscious or not, is based on the flawed premise that if they keep talking, the truth of the mechanical failure will somehow change or the cost will magically disappear.
Right, the logic loop?
It won't. The manager and the advisor must be the ultimate guarantors of that truth. Let's actually move to the lightning round and hit all 10 of these rewarder rules quickly, because they act like the jury instructions in this whole legal framework we've built.
Oh, I like that. The jury instructions. Let's do it.
Okay, rules 1 and 2, one real answer and stop shopping. Basically, repetition doesn't unlock a secret menu.
Fully agree there. Asking 5 times doesn't change the answer.
Rules 3 and 4. Advisors aren't drive-by diagnosticians, and the division of roles. I think this perfectly proves the liability argument.
I agree with the rules, but I stress that this protects the technician's time just as much as it protects the advisor from liability.
Fair enough. Rules 5 and 6. Free guesses get expensive, and policy is protection. As I noted, free now means costly later with comebacks and complaints.
Right. And rules 7 and 8, take no as a boundary and trust the process. I think this is where healthy departments excel. They run on those boundaries, not on who can argue the longest.
Exactly. And finally, rules 9 and 10. Back policy and repetition doesn't rewrite reality, which is a perfect summary of our clash on management's role. Management has to hold the line.
If you soften the boundary too much in the name of de-escalation, you do risk giving false reassurance. I'll give you that.
Yes. Telling a customer it doesn't sound too bad just to get them out the door feeling good is infinitely worse than telling them a hard truth about diagnostic fees. Policy protects the business from undocumented liability, it protects the tech from secondhand info, and crucially, it protects the customer from bad guesses.
I still come at it from a slightly different angle. I believe you can maintain the absolute integrity of that diagnostic process without the absolute severity of the enforcement. We both agree that the technician is the only appropriate person to diagnose a vehicle.
100%.
We both agree that an undocumented quick listen in the drive circumvents the necessary expertise for proper repair, but the mechanism of delivering that truth matters. The rewording ritual is a symptom of an information asymmetry.
Meaning they just don't know what we know.
Exactly. The customer knows they're out of their depth, they know it might be really expensive, and they are grasping for any life raft of free information they can find. Recognizing that dynamic allows an advisor to hold the line with professional compassion, rather than viewing the encounter as some kind of courtroom cross-examination.
Well, as we draw this discussion to a close, it is pretty clear we have reached a strong point of convergence on the core mechanics of the text. The division of roles in a service department is sacred. Bypassing the repair order process creates a cascade of operational failures from the service desk all the way to the technician's bay.
We do completely agree on the operational necessity of the repair order. Where we maintain our continued disagreement is in the framing of the human interaction itself.
Right.
You view Eagle's strict, almost militaristic framing as necessary protection against an unfair liability trap. I view it as an overly defensive posture.
Boundaries are essential to protect the repair process, but if we assume every persistent reworker is laying a trap, we lose the fundamental service aspect of customer service.
And I maintain that regardless of the customer's intent, whether it is born of financial desperation, ignorance of the process, or an actual manipulative strategy, the outcome for the advisor and the business is exactly the same: an unacceptable assumption of legal and financial liability.
A fair point.
By examining this rewording ritual from both a strict liability standpoint and a human behavior standpoint, we really gain a much deeper understanding of the intense, high-stakes dynamics at play in a service department. The interaction is never just about a random noise. It is about establishing professional authority, maintaining process integrity, and navigating the complex psychology of negotiation in real time.
There is certainly much more to explore in this material. Understanding how these boundaries shape professional environments is critical for anyone managing complex customer interactions. I'm looking forward to our next segment when we tackle Chapter 4, titled The Couple Scam. That's going to be an intense argument. I can already feel it in my core.
Your guide to customer service addresses the couple scam. That's where the wife drops off in the morning, the husband picks up at night and complains about the bill. Your Guide to Customer Service by Brandon Eagle. You can get it on Amazon and Kindle.
Thank you for listening to Discover You Radio's Discussions. We'd like to invite you to research was spotlighted on this episode. And if they have a website, join their mailing list. Thank you for your support.